So on this Mondays with Moriniki, we're going to talk about what gets in the way of execution. So if you didn't see part one, go back and watch that last time we talked about why execution matters. But now we want to talk about what gets in the way of effective execution. And so, when we think about execution, we think about what gets in the way. I want us to first think about poor prioritization. And this is when I think about poor prioritization, I want you to start thinking about the fact that if everything is important, nothing is important. Like, I get it, high profile job, busy, senior, all the things. And yet, there has to be some level of hierarchy and ranking system as it relates to the task that you have on your to-do list, and frankly whether the task even make it to your to-do list. And I consistently see with clients that there is a failure to prioritize, and it can't just be like, I want to be helpful, and so I'm going to do this thing. There has to be an appreciation. There are capacity constraints, there are energy constraints, there are time constraints. And so it's just realistically, you can't do all the things. And the failure to prioritize is part of what's keeping you from actually executing efficiently. So you're getting some stuff done, but then are you actually getting the right things done? And so this is how we see people getting stuck in that spiral of being busy, but like, was what you did actually beneficial? And so churning and burning, but not actually on the things that are most important. Another thing is being a procrastination powerhouse. And so I think that this is really where you're focusing on um, all of the excuses and none of the execution. And so you've started to prioritize, but what you're prioritizing is being able to come up with the excuses for why you didn't get something done. And a lot of times what I find with clients who are procrastinating is that we have made this task that we're avoiding so big and so overwhelming in our head. And more often than not, when you actually sit down and start tackling the thing, even if it's something you didn't want to do, even if it is a lot of work, it's rarely as bad or big as you thought it was. But what is like for sure is the longer you keep avoiding it, the worse it's going to get. It's not going to get better. And so it really is that kind of sit down and is it eat the frog first or eat the elephant first? Regardless, eat that critter first and just start taking bite-sized bits. And so that's how I think, we'll talk about effective strategies next week, but one of the things around procrastination in particular is a lot of times you're focusing on the project, this big thing I need to get done, and you haven't broken that thing down into individual tasks. And so, what I find to be very helpful usually is if it's like, I want to complete my taxes. Okay, what are the different individual tasks I need to complete in order such that when I've done all these tasks, my taxes are done? So it might be calling my accountant, pulling together my receipts, pulling out last year's taxes, da 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 da. And so it's like each individual task, I can check those off and I can complete those with less overwhelm. And in doing all of those things, the bigger task of my taxes being done is now complete. And so start to see how you can reverse engineer and break down some of these things that you're procrastinating on, because I find like 9 times out of 10, it just feels so big. And if you start to break it down into more manageable task and subsets, it's easier to start to dig in and get some of that momentum to kind of start leaning into that thing. The other thing I've seen is pitiful plans. And like they say, what is it? Fail to plan, plan to fail. And I think that a lot of times people create plans, but they're not creating plans that are realistic. They're not creating plans that give them any wiggle room for the unexpected to happen. They're not creating plans because they don't like to plan and they like to fly by the seat of their pants. Whatever the thing is, but really I want you to kind of shift your mindset around what planning is. And it's not about boxing you in. It is just giving you a brainstorming session, an opportunity to kind of pressure test. This is the path I'm planning on taking. Do I see any major obstacles and hurdles that I can spot outright? And if so, how can I kind of strategize? And this is so that you don't ideally get down a process and you start running into all these hoops and things that, had you just taken a little bit of planning time, you could have noticed on the front end and saved yourself a lot of heartache and headache. And so think about planning as a little bit of your insurance policy. And how do I ensure that, because my time is limited, that when I start working on this thing, I'm going to have ideally the most kind of seamless process possible, and if nothing else, that it's going to be as efficient as it can be without me knowing the kind of unknown variables. And so think about it as like, this is how I accelerate, by mapping out and having a strategy to move forward, as opposed to the winging it, which inevitably leads to me missing something and forgetting something. And it kind of ties into some of the other things with prioritization, is because when you also plan, you can figure out how you're going to fit things. So you have your prioritization, and you can see as you plan things out, oh, I can fit this in here, I can move this here, this may actually have to move because it doesn't work with the timeline that I've now come up with. And so it helps you to kind of rejigger things and make sure that no balls are dropping and see how everything kind of fits in and fits together. The other thing is like chronic chaos. And so here's the thing, especially for like a lot of my senior folks, this, and I don't know where this became the thing, and I don't know if it's from TV show, but this idea that we kind of glorify people who can operate in chaos, but that is said in love, something that should not really be celebrated, because even though you're able to get stuff done, you have to start thinking like, at what cost? The level of stress, the level of angst, the level of just being chaotic and everywhere. And so, what I want you to also think about is less about I'm operating in chaos, but more about the chaos you're causing other people. Because the reality is, when you operate in chaos, all the people who support you are now being pulled into that. They're now having to be and function in a very chaotic fashion to match your pace. And that's not fair to them. And so, I think as leaders, it's important to think about, how am I showing up? How am I impacting the others around me? Am I now creating inefficiencies and stunting someone else from being a high performer because of how I operate and how I move? Because that is really what happens. The number of folks who are just like, I'm trying to get my schedule together, I'm trying to be more efficient, this and that, but it's hard because my leader is just all over the place and they just dump stuff on me, and I try to come up with this or that, but they just are chaotic. And so think about it more as how you then are impacting other people, and not just the impact it has to you, which should be sufficient enough to motivate you. But for those who it's not, let's just think about the knock-on effect. Multitasking mishaps. So this, again, this whole thing about like being a multitasker is really not, it's not it. Like, it's not something that I think we should continue to be trying to like push as the goal or the standard. The reality is, like, when you were talking about multitasking, you're kind of short circuiting your brain. You're basically telling your brain to like go here, go here, go here, go here, and it's just not meant to have to go back and forth like this little tennis or ping pong game, in that fashion. You're not using your brain to its max capacity in the most efficient or effective way. And so there is a level of angst and stress that you are causing. Why? Because you typically, when you're a multitasker, you have so many things that you're doing at once, and none of them are completed. And there is a level of relief and peace and a sensation of just like, that you get when you finish stuff. But when you are a chronic, multitasker, you're never actually finishing anything. So your brain is always in this state of stressing about like, it's unfinished, it's unfinished, it's unfinished. There's another thing to do, there's another thing to do, there's another thing to do. As opposed to when it's, I'm going to do this task, I do it, and I'm done, and now I move on to the next thing. And so it's a bit of rewiring, and I can already hear the chorus of people being like, well, Moriniki, where I work, there's a lot of things that come in. Yes, there are a lot of things that come in. And what comes in may come in multifaceted ways, but that doesn't mean that that's how you need to attack it or execute it. Because more often than not, we're being reactionary, and we're not being strategic and tactical in how we're knocking out the stuff on our list. As I'm not saying that you're not going to have to pivot from things sometimes when the unexpected comes up. I am saying that more often than not, when people are multitasking, a lot of times we're shifting between things because we're kind of dipping back into the procrastination. I don't want to do this, or because we want to people please and somebody we liked asked us, and so now it's a prioritization issue because I'm not focusing on what's important, but more just, who asked me and I like them, and so I'm going to do it. There's all these other little factors that are on this list that tend to come into what leads us to multitasking. And the mishaps that I find happen is that there's always a ball that's dropping. And while in life we're going to drop balls, I find that when we're multitasking, we end up inadvertently dropping balls and we end up forgetting that we even dropped the ball. And so it's not like, oh, I dropped it and I'm going to go pick it up. It's like, I don't even know that happened because I'm trying to like do all these things. And so I just think that we really, if we want to be honest, if we want to move forward, we have to start thinking a little bit more strategically about how we're operating so that we can be more productive. And the last thing is fuel failure. And this is just because like it's burnout. It is burnout and it is running on empty. And it is this thing that I keep seeing people doing. You know, you have to think about just your natural capacity and exhaustion and things, and then you factor in the world and life is lifing and all of the things that you see in the news and how much you're taking in of those things. And so a lot of people are just trying to operate at a very high level with an empty fuel tank. And so when you have no fuel, when your fuel fails you, that is going to just out the gate make execution 10 times harder. And so I really beg you to be honest about where you are from a capacity standpoint and then recalibrate based on that, because trying, like, especially as we get older and more senior, like nobody is, this whole thing about trying to run on empty is not a good look, and it's not practical. And the quality of what you're putting out, even if you're getting it done and you're still like being praised for executing on no sleep, like it's like stop trying to be team no sleep, we're grown, you know. So I hope that just gives you some food for thought in terms of what is potentially getting in the way as it relates to execution. Next week we're going to talk about like what good execution looks like and what some of those strategies are. So I'll talk to you then.